Hi, everybody. Good morning. This week, we will be continuing working on our short stories in our Building Community unit plan. We're going to be reading two short stories this week, A Priceless Lesson in Humility, and our second story will be called Joseph's Castle in the Sky. Two very amazing stories with very powerful messages that our students are sure to enjoy. I just want to once again remind you of the teacher's guide, which can be accessed by following this link in the notes section of the first slide. The teacher's guide is very helpful and provides a lot of information in understanding the design of these lessons. The first slide shows an outline of the entire unit. This unit is Building Community, and these are the 5 weeks, the topics for each week, and the final day 5 project component from each week. Now, week 5 will be a cumulative project based on the information the students have learned in weeks 1 to 4. These units have focused on the ELA priority learning standards selected by the Department of Education based on the Common Core. Again, this is a list of the lesson objectives that will be covered in this unit. There's information about the inspiration behind the unit, and you will note that the New York State's culturally responsive sustaining education framework played a large role in inspiring the design of these lessons. There's more information on the unit design. This is some more background information for the teachers to consider when implementing these lessons and providing modifications for their individual students. Some additional guidelines for providing synchronous instruction. Now, all these lessons are designed ideally for the lessons to be delivered live and synchronously. However, there's many ways that the lessons could also be delivered asynchronously. But understandably, that model would not be recommended for ENL students, especially entering and emerging ENL language learners. Most of the lessons contain 5 primary segments, the 5 moments. There'll be an opening do now activity, there'll be a before reading activity, a format or approach for diving into the text, an after reading activity, as well as a number of closing and connecting activities in which this teacher could select from. There's some more information about the individual pieces of each lesson, and some additional technical considerations for the teacher to consider in preparing the lesson for his or her students. So today's lesson is going to be day 1 of week 2, where we'll be reading a short story, A Priceless Lesson in Humility, that we'll be working on for days 1 and 2. And then our second story, Joseph's Castle in the Sky, we'll be working on for days 3 and 4. Day 5 will have a culminating cumulative activity. There'll be our usual opening do now warm-up routine. There will be a before reading activity that the teacher could present. And as you can see, the individual boxes could be moved to the yellow cards. So this is an activity that students will complete, and they'll associate the vocabulary in the white boxes to the main ideas in the yellow boxes. Today's purpose. Today we are going to be reading an essay about a person who learns a valuable lesson after he makes a mistake. Let's read to identify who he is and how that mistake is made. Again, there'll be 2 academic vocabulary words again this week. Our words for this week are humility and strength. An effective graphic organizer for addressing these academic vocabulary words is called a word knowledge building organizer, or a word concept knowledge building matrix. This is an excellent tool for students to use throughout the week, and they can continue to add information to these words or concepts as they learn more about them throughout the week. Now, our words for this week are going to be humility and strength. Now, you can ask students their understanding or their prior knowledge of these terms, but humility is to be humble or modest. Strength is to be strong, powerful, and may come in different forms. There are different types of being strong, different ways to be strong. It could be physical strength, or it could be emotional strength if you're a strong person inside. Then we'll be diving into into the text. Then we'll be completing our into the text. There's an audio recording of the text, which could be found. Here's a link to the PDF of the document, which could be opened at that link, as well as a link to an audio recording of the text. Right, there's a number of discussion questions for the students to work on while reading the text. There's an after reading activity, which students could work on in partners. They would come up with questions about these different aspects of the story, and one student could take the role of the author, and they could predict the author's response to their partner's questions. Finally, there's a number of closing and connecting activities. Teachers could check for understanding, check if students were able to understand the story, and what was the main, if they could put into their own words, the main mistake that the author had made. Students could reflect if they had ever made a similar mistake in their life. As a writing activity, they could write an apology to the person who they made that mistake towards, who they acted with prejudice towards, and they could even extend the learning by diving deeper into the importance of Washington, D.C. and its role as our nation's capital. Now, all of these questions and activities for the students can be compiled into a Google document for the students to work on throughout the week. So you could see this one document contains the questions and activities for both of the stories that students will read this week, as well as the culminating day 5 activity. Now, keeping everything in one document allows students to keep their work very organized and also makes it easy for the teacher to address the different levels and the different pacing of each individual student. Now let's jump right into today's lesson. Could somebody please read today's essential question? Good. How can sharing our stories make us stronger? Good. Can somebody please read today's 2 lesson objectives? Good. To summarize key ideas and details in a text, and to explore how words or phrases are used in a text to shape the meaning or tone. Let's look at this image. What do you see? What do you think? What do you wonder? Now the teacher could ask this to the students, and they could identify things they see, think, and wonder from the image. Here's some sentence starters provided to help students who may need some extra support with this activity, and the teacher could pause the video at this point to give students an opportunity to respond. Students may say, in the image, I see the White House. Students may say, I think that all these places are in Washington, D.C. Students may also say, one thing I wonder is, when were all these buildings and monuments built? Now, this is a before reading activity. It won't work in the present mode, but again, if this teacher exits, the teacher could make this a little bigger on the projector board by sliding the note section down, and the cards could easily be manipulated to go to their appropriate spot based on the students. So the students could connect homeless folks. Is that a person, place, or idea? And the students would respond to each one of the terms in the white boxes. Now at this point, the teacher would begin working through the text with the students. There's a number of ways to address the text, to have students read aloud, for the teacher to read aloud, for the teacher to read aloud, and then students to reread independently. There's also an audio recording that may help, depending on the student's individual needs, interests, and abilities. Here is a number of discussion questions for the students to respond to address their comprehension of the story. Now here's an after reading activity, once again, where based on based on the story. Students could come up with questions about these topics and then respond to their partner's questions as if they were the author themselves. Finally, there's a number of closing and connecting activities where the teacher could check for understanding, where students could make a connection if they have gone through a similar experience as what the author had gone through. They could complete a writing activity as a follow-up where they write a message to the person who they acted improperly towards, acted with prejudice towards. And finally, the teacher could bring in some additional information about Washington, D.C., which could help students have a better understanding of our nation's history and our nation's system of government, which could support them in their social studies classes. So at this time, you could jump into the before reading activity, and I'm sure your students will absolutely love today's story. Enjoy the lesson.